Hi, it's Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show. I'm your host, and for nearly 2 decades now, I've been an executive coach and leadership development consultant. And on this show, I share evidence-based insights from my coaching, leadership, and psychological expertise, and inspiring interviews that help women like you to combine your work, life, and motherhood in a more successful and sustainable way. Join me and my special guests as we delve into leadership and lifestyle topics for women, empowering you to thrive one conversation at a time. I'm so happy that you're here, and let's get on with today's episode. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Nikki Lowe, and in today's episode, I'm shining a light on an exciting collaboration with one of my clients, UKG, who are a global software company. I recently curated and delivered a mental load speaker series for them, which reached over 3,000 employees worldwide. And together I collaborated with some incredible experts, including Dr. Kate Mancino, who you may have heard on the podcast because we were talking about mental load and her book, Equal Partners. We also collaborated with Dr. Molly Dickens, who heads up the Maternal Stress Project, and Dr. Shamila Logathas, who is an expert on fair play. And we explored the often invisible labour of the mental load and its impact not just at home, but on leadership pipelines, retention, and workplace wellbeing. And today, joining me are two incredible people who brought this series to life. One is Mille Holst-Barry, who I've known for a number of years now and has been one of my clients, who also is the co-chair of UKG's female employee resource group called Fire Up, and the inspiration behind this whole initiative. And when Mill is not the co-chair for Fire Up, she's responsible for partnerships and alliances across EMEA for UKG. And we're also joined by her colleague, Jeremy Casupanan, who's passionate about belonging, and he's chair of UKG's Aspire employee resource group. And Jeremy is based in the US and is a strategic alliance manager for UKG. And together in this episode, we explore why UKG made this commitment to the mental load speaker series, the impact it had, and why conversations about the mental load matter in every workplace. I'm going to take you behind the scenes on the work that we did together and the impact it's had. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So welcome to you both. It's great to have you here. I know, Jeremy, in your part of the world today, you're joining us early morning, and Mille, like me, we're kind of early afternoon here. So it's great to be on this call with you. So for those that don't know about UKG, you as a company and what you do, would you mind sharing a bit about the organisation you work for, perhaps to begin with, because that's useful context?
Absolutely, Nikki. And thanks so much for having us on. So UKG is a leader in HR, pay, workforce management, software solutions. We have about 80,000 customers globally. And really what we're trying to do is empower the working world. So our customers, i.e. employers, are the ones that need the resources to ensure that their people and their employees work at their best and feel at their best and do their best.
Brilliant. And I've been lucky enough to work with your company for about, I think it's 4 coming up to 5 years. And it's just an incredible organisation. And we'll get into just how incredible it is. But in terms of kind of, you're a global kind of organisation, roughly how many people are in the UKG? So how many UKGers, as you call yourselves, do you have?
We have about 15,000. And growing across many different countries.
Amazing.
But our headquarters are in Boston, near Boston, in Massachusetts, and then we have dual headquarters in Weston, Florida.
Amazing.
Employees all over the globe.
Yeah, and obviously what we're going to be diving into today is just the global span of what we did with the Mental Load series. But to begin with, Mille, can you share a bit about the employee resource group that you kind of are part of? I believe you co-chair of?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm the co-chair of our ERG called Fire Up, which is our female inclusion, resilience and excellence group, where we really try and harness the power of belonging. It's very focused on females, so we want for people to have like a shared identity and find that in the group. We want people to have shared experiences, and then we also want to drive a lot of allyship through that resource group.
And that's a real strong sense I get from UKG, is this sense of belonging, and that you've got like a head of belonging. And I just love that, because it really, you get that strong sense. So thank you for that. And from Jeremy, from your perspective, are you co-chair or chair of Aspire ERG? So would you mind sharing about that?
Absolutely. I'm co-chair of Aspire, which is our Asian and Pacific Islander ERG. And really what we're trying to do is empower our API community, empower our advocates of the API community, and really create this culture celebration of who we are as a people, we are as a workforce, through things like professional development, cultural celebrations, all types of events, charitable events, to just really celebrate that. And talking about UKG and inclusion is very much at the center. You know, we're a very people-first organization, and our people start, you know, in all of the different communities we have, and making sure that we can celebrate and empower those communities.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I think that's important context as we go into actually what brings us together today to talk about. So a little while ago, Mille, you came to me with an idea, and would you mind kind of sharing what the idea was and what really was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as I became a mother, I was very lucky to be coached by you when I came back to work for my maternity. And I think I would say overwhelmed is a very good way of describing how I felt coming back to work. I was really fortunate to have UKG sponsor coaching with yourself to help me settle into that new role. And that really helped me with describing how I felt and understanding why I felt the way I felt. And you also introduced to me these two words, mental load, that I hadn't as such heard about before. And you helped me understand what it was and how I could help talk to my partner about mental load. And a couple of years later, I started to see mental load actually coming up more and more. And I started to have more open conversations, especially with my colleagues, about mental load. And I remember in the start, when I started these conversations and I shared the word mental load, my colleagues' shoulders would almost like calm down, and they would just look so relieved in their eyes and in their face, because I've actually now shared a word with them that they didn't have before, just like I didn't have it when I met you and you taught me about it. And through that, I got inspired to see whether I could help and support more people in UKG to understand mental load and understand how we could support our colleagues, both males and females, to have these conversations at home and at work. And that was how I came about this whole idea of my idea if I wanted to do something, I wasn't sure how I could do it. And that was actually when I reached out to you, talking about it a little bit like I talk about it now, explaining what my thoughts were, to see whether you could help put something together that could put mental load on the roadmap within UKG, and not just within our Fire Up female ERG, but across ERGs in UKG, because it's such an important subject for everyone to talk about.
Yeah. And that's what I love about you, Mille. You've got this idea, but you wanted to help not just people in Europe. You were like, I want to help globally. And then you were like, actually, it isn't just about women. This touches the lives of everybody, as we're going to kind of dive into in this discussion. And you were like, I don't just want one speaker. I want different perspectives on this. And so this idea grew. And so you had this idea of actually a speaker series. We want a number of different speakers. And I just thought that was a real kind of visionary approach. And so we collaborated and brought in there was kind of 4 speakers, wasn't there? And we did it across all of your ERGs could participate. So could you give a little bit of how many, because we've talked about two of them that you kind of individually touched, but how many ERGs do you have within UKG?
We have 10 ERGs. And so it covers everything from our young professionals to our African American and Black individuals, as well as, our Latin and Hispanic folks as well. So it covers the gamut. So we have a lot.
And so you had this vision to roll it out across all of them. And I think it touched about 3,000 people, was it, across the speaker series, which is just incredible.
Absolutely. It was really incredible how you helped set up, how you helped my vision become live, right? I wanted to make sure we didn't just have a session. We talked about mental load and then that was it. I wanted people to understand, because that was also one of the things for myself, to understand that mental load is not something that is here because of my fault or because of my husband's fault. Like there's almost a scientific background to mental load. And I wanted people to understand that it's no one's fault necessarily. It's not pointing fingers, and understand how did it happen? How did we end up in this situation? From different kind of perspectives, and then also what can we actually do? How can we have informed conversations at home and at work? And what are the next steps I can take as an individual here? What are the conversations I can have? So I wanted to have it manifold, to be relevant to many different people, but also to give people an understanding and for people to be able to do an action afterwards.
I love that. And I think it would have probably been an easy sell for the Fire Up group, because it's probably a term that women, if they've not heard of, they can relate to really, really easily. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Jeremy, how did this concept fit within your ERG and all the other ERGs? Was it something that there was an immediate resonance for, that was like, yes, we can, this is something that we have this lived experience of as well?
And so, like Mille, when they proposed the term to us, mental load, a lot of us had to figure out what that was. And so, when obviously, when the Fire Up team comes to us with an idea, we listen. We want to make sure it's something that our community, as the API community, can grab onto. And as soon as we started to hear, kind of the talk tracks. And I think the thing that did it for us was Dr. Sharmila Logathas. And when she speaks about fair play in the home, and she speaks about the mental load that we go through in our professional and personal lives, and I think that resonated with us in the API community, because there is this kind of, status and more maybe traditional gender roles in the home. And as a newer generation, we're trying to break those molds and really kind of dive into that. So as soon as we understood that and how that can fit in with our members, we were definitely on board.
Brilliant. So I suppose we've talked about the mental load, and I've actually had Kate Mangino on the podcast talking about it as a separate subject. But for those people that may not have listened to that episode, what does mental load mean to each of you? Because I think there's the external viewpoint on what mental load is, but I'd love to hear your kind of own experience as much as you're willing to share about what it means to you personally. So, Mille, I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having learned about mental load, right, what it means for me is that how do we as a household succeed, right, with everything that has to be done? How do we make sure that we plan our life and execute it in a way that we both enjoy and that we both can exist with, right? Being a family with a small child, there's a never ending list of things to do, right? So mental load for me is to make sure that we fairly distribute the things that we have to do in the house to the person that has the capacity to do that at the time and this stage we are in currently.
Great description. Thank you for that. And from your perspective, Jeremy, what does it mean for you?
Definitely. So mental load, as I watch the calls, as I go through and went through the series, it's really that kind of to me, it's kind of that invisible weight that we carry. It's just how much capacity we have as an individual to kind of take on certain tasks, not only in the workplace, but also at home. I think we all, and this is something that I'm kind of going through, is I think in us as a society, we're tasked to always do more. And as an API individual and in the API community, I think there is also this kind of invisible line of not to speak up when we need help. And specifically as a male, not to ask for help. And what it taught me and what mental load means now is we can take on all these things, but we have to speak up. We have to communicate. We have to make sure that our folks at work know, like, hey, when we're at capacity, when we kind of need some help, we have to let our folks at home know the same thing. And really what Mille said actually resonated with me, because one of my core values has always been kind of a deep passion to helping others succeed. But after going through this, it's actually helping everybody succeed, including myself. And so it's kind of this kind of perspective change that has happened.
I love that. And I also love that during the conversations, because it was such a global and inclusive conversation that you'd curated, those cultural nuances came out, and the fact that, I really appreciated your male perspective in this, Jeremy, and how open you are and were about actually sharing your own experiences. I think all of those nuances just gave it a real depth. So I'm interested in how this shows up in your own households. Like what, because I think, again, that really came out in the conversations about everybody's situation is unique, and yet there are these kind of cultural, societal, gender norms that are playing out that are like the invisible gravitational pulls around it. So again, sharing what feels comfortable. I'd love to hear your different perspectives on how this plays out in your own homes. Perhaps Mille, for you first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've had to work a lot with myself over the last couple of years to let go of control of how things are done, and almost allow my husband to take over tasks needing to be done in the home, and also allowing him to do them in his way, and most of the time on his timeline, right? So so in our house, I think, again, depending on capacity, how busy we are at work, what's going on in our personal lives, we are trying to share things quite 50-50. We both have a full-time demanding job. And therefore, it's important that the tasks that has to be done are being shared as fairly and equally as possible. Some weeks, I'm traveling where my husband will be taking on all of it. I travel with my job, he doesn't. So I know that requires a lot of him. So when I do that, I make sure that the fridge is filled. He knows what he's cooking potentially the next week. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I'm sending small presents with Deliveroo that are arriving in the evening, like gin and tonics and cakes, just so he knows it's being appreciated, right? And obviously he makes sure that also I know that things are going well at home when I am away, so that it's a bit easier. And I think whether you're a man or a woman or a mom or dad, traveling away from your partner, your family, or your pets are always challenging, right? So I think in our house, sorry to answer your question, it's split fairly easily. The other person can take on more or less when they're more or less busy, but I do think we have quite a nice balance. It's not something we always had. As I said, I had to work a lot with myself to let go. But yeah, it's also not something that's necessarily done. I think it's something you continuously have to work on and continuously have to talk about.
And I think that's really important to hear that, because it sounds like it would be really easy to people go, oh, they've got it sorted. But the work you've put in to get to that point, and I'm imagining navigating gender differences, but also cultural differences, because you and your husband have a different country of origin. And I imagine that that adds a different kind of perspective in, and that you're navigating. And it's amazing to hear the point you've got to, and that appreciation for each other, like the little gifts. I'm like, oh, I don't do that. That is a really good idea.
And we actually had, I can tell, we had challenges with my husband's previous employer because they were expecting me to take on more in the house than him. So we had challenges around him having to pick up our child from daycare at specific times, or not being available, or having sick days, which you have every now and then when you have a child. And that was really hard. That was really hard for our relationship. And it was really hard. Also, it was really hard for him because he obviously knew that was adding pressure on our situation at home, and he didn't want that. And it was really frustrating for me trying to be a modern family, or what you would call it, that they were not at all supportive of that situation.
Wow. So there was always, you're having to navigate that his employer was expecting you to be the default parent and wasn't given allowances to actually, there's equal parenting going on here. And I also love that you share about actually that shift for you, about you thought this was just an issue in your own home. And I think so many of us, and I know I went through that, is like, oh, we've not got this sorted, therefore it's a personal failing in our relationship or our marriage. And then that light bulb moment of going, oh no, this isn't a personal issue. This is a cultural society issue. Like, this is playing out on a much bigger scale, and we're just getting caught up in the wake of it all. And I think that for so many people is so relatable when you can make that shift to going, it's not a personal failing, it's like a society failing. And how do we give each other compassion for that? And I love that you found your way through it. So thank you. So Jeremy, from your perspective, how does this show up in your home?
Yes. So I think this came up on one of our sessions with Dr. Logathas. And so I guess I'll start with a couple things. And I told Malay this yesterday, and my wife is just a boss. She's a VP at her company. She's always done well, always succeeded, always worked hard. And so to understand that part of it and how she sits in her company, you kind of understand kind of our household. And so just a couple stories from her, being a VP and having direct reports and talking about kind of the cultural landscape. She travels quite a bit. And so there'll be times when she goes to other countries and there'll be a question directed towards her team, and they'll turn to the male counterpart, her direct report, like the sales manager, and ask him. And she always has to kind of remind them, like, hey, I'm the VP here. And so she has to kind of put on this, almost work extra hard just to kind of earn her spot. And so she does that, and she does it, amazingly. But when it comes to the household and kind of our responsibilities and the mental load, I work 100% remote. And so I think I also shared with you, Nikki, I work kind of off hours. So naturally, I'm at home. If my 10-year-old son is at home, I can tend to him. I can also take him to all his activities after school. And luckily, UKG affords me that flexible schedule. But over time, it's kind of become this like, oh, Jeremy's at home. He works remote. He can take care of it. And there was this, for a couple of years, there was just this imbalance of responsibilities. I would handle all the scheduling with his activities and kind of the play dates and stuff. And it's funny because when we first started at his school, there's a phone list, and the moms would always text my wife like, hey, can we meet up? Or, hey, this is going on. And she's so busy, she ignores a lot of those. So eventually it got to the point where they started to reach out to me. So I say all this because in a traditional sense, it's kind of a reverse, and not in a bad way, but it wasn't until this mental load and actually, going to therapy myself of trying to let go of some of these tasks, as Malay said, and let my wife handle it. And so something we've done this year that's worked really well is, again, having the open communication as a male saying, hey, I need help. I can't do all this. I can't cook dinner and take our son to his activities. So we meet once a month to go over kind of household items and just make sure that, she can help in some of those and really kind of divide and conquer a bit more and be pulling on the same side of the rope, so to speak. So it's been a really interesting journey. But I think part of it for me is I needed to speak up and say, hey, I'm burning out here. I need some help. And she was always willing to do it, but I just needed to say something.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jeremy, because I think that's really important for people to hear the kind of the nuance around this and how it shows up in different ways, depending on the dynamics of your relationship and the working kind of practices. And also how important that was for you to seek the support to just work through it. And I think this was the whole point in you initiating this conversation. So I would love to move on now to think about actually what impact did this have, because it was done at a global level. So there are all those nuances. Like, what was some of the feedback that you received on how it landed, what people took from it?
Yeah, I can start maybe. Again, I think the shoulders coming down, right? The feeling like the people had a language now to use around how they felt was some of the feedback we received. Also, people felt seen, and they felt it was very relatable what we were talking about. Again, the thing about like belonging and feeling like there's UKG are looking after people not just to do their work, but beyond that situation, right? I think that really helped in that regard as well.
I would agree. I think it was, we host a lot of events, ERGs do throughout the year. And I think this was a well-attended series. It was a well-received series, at least from our members' perspective. And again, playing on the API community, there is a lot of suffering in silence where you're taking on all these different tasks because either somebody says, hey, you're good at spreadsheets. Why don't you do that? Or, hey, you're good at scheduling these, work dinners. Why don't you do that? Where it's like, again, speaking up, advocating for yourself. I think that was the biggest takeaway from at least our ERG. And it's something we have to continue, and we have to keep on fighting the good fight, so to speak.
And I think that's a really good point you make there, Jeremy, because we weren't just talking about mental load in the home. We were talking about mental load in the workplace and what's the invisible kind of tasks that aren't recognised or rewarded, but still have to be done. And I think by nature, those that are involved in ERGs tend to be those that step forward, who are conscientious, who want to help, but as a result can shoulder more than perhaps other people.
Yeah, and I think that actually came up in conversation in some of our sessions as well, right? Where people started talking about the mental load at work as well, right? And I think I don't think that as spoken of, and maybe not maybe, hopefully that will be more thing we talk about as time goes on, and it will be more visible who carries the mental load in a workplace, right? Because I do think that's a really important conversation as well. Also, you can say some of the people carrying the mental load may have less time to focus on their real job or their full-time job. And that may mean that they actually have less time to potentially develop themselves professionally. They're less likely to be promoted because they carry and spend their time doing all these other things that are all amazing things and great things and probably things they love doing, but that may actually sometimes negatively impact them, which obviously is not a situation you want to be in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's that balance, isn't it? This, that stuff is important and it needs to be done, but it has to be fairly distributed and fairly recognised, and the cost implications of doing that to be balanced as well. So what kind of feedback have you had from people about the impact of these sessions?
Well, actually, just yesterday I saw another. We have a Teams chat going on from this series, and just yesterday I saw another person asking for access to the cards that were in our last session. We were very lucky to have a session about fair play, and I know you had even the podcast previously. And so just yesterday, someone asked, where was that link for those cards? I really want to download them. I really want to talk about it. So I think there's been a huge impact on people being able to take this, not just at work, but also with them home, right? And start talking to their partner about this, start talking about how do we distribute tasks. And again, I know in my household it's very 50-50. It doesn't have to be 50-50, but I think it's important to have a conversation about what are you currently doing? What am I currently doing? What is our expectations around these things that has to be done? And what is the best way we can do them to have a harmonious relationship and household, right?
Yeah. And so for those that may not have listened to Eve's podcast or know about fair play, Eve Rodsky looked at all the tasks that need to be done in a home just to keep kind of the wheels running. And what she determined was there's actually 60 tasks if you don't have children, 100 if you do have children. Things like anything from who gets the cars serviced through to who takes the bins out, who does the school communications. And so there's this card series of 100 cards that you can have conversation about, well, who holds the cars? And just as you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be 50-50. It has to be equitable rather than equal. So it feels fair depending on your dynamics. And we were really keen, and you were specifically keen about with this mental load series, how can we make it practical? How can we give people toolkits? And obviously Dr. Shamila kindly provided the cards. And so it's great that people are wanting to keep that conversation alive and talk about it. So that is great to hear. From your perspective, Jeremy, what is it you've been hearing?
Well, so similarly, the number one request that we got and was the cards, the fair play cards. I think that resonated so well with our members. But the beautiful thing that's happened from that is somebody would email myself and my fellow co-chairs like, hey, I'd love the session. Can I get those cards? So there were a couple times we said, hey, here are the cards. And then there would be follow-up dialogue of like, oh, how do you use these? How did it work? What's your dynamic look like? And it's opened up conversations even further when I'm on the phone with people of asking, okay, what's your dynamic at home? And I could tell them, hey, I'm tech support, I'm handyman, I'm car mechanic, I'm all of these things. And it's great. But I had to learn to kind of step back from some of these things and really make it equal in the home. And so it's just the feedback and just kind of, again, back to what UKG is about, just empowering our people. I think that it resonated not only from a workplace perspective, but knowing that when you empower people in the home, they come to the workplace ready and recharged. And it's definitely part of our ethos, and they loved it.
I love that. And that whole piece, as you were talking, Jeremy, it was making me think about that actually when we hit the conflict in our relationships, whether it be at work with like the invisible load at work or in our homes, we can see that conflict as something negative. But if we can reframe it as actually conflict is growth trying to happen. And now we're having more conscious kind of relationships. And that means we're leaning into and having those conversations, opening up the conversations, gives the possibility of the shift and the reframe around it. And it's amazing to hear that that's kind of what's happened for people. So you've already alluded, Jeremy, to some of the kind of wider context of this about actually why would UKG invest in this? Because, it's an investment to put on these kind of to host the employee resource groups, let alone have outside speakers in. And you've alluded to some of that there. But for other organisations who might be thinking, this actually sounds interesting, what would you tell them about actually what you do with your ERGs, or what the impact of running something like this has been for you?
Yeah, definitely. So UKG, our sister company, Great Place to Work, is really a company that thrives and helps organizations teach their customers how to create these environments for success and just performance driven companies. And it all starts with the people. And we had I was fortunate enough to go to their Great Place to Work Summit, where they had a lot of these top companies that are listed as great places to work speak about their mission and how they empower their people. And one of the CEOs, his mission was to have his employees leave work happier than when they came in, because he knew that if they left happy, they come home happy, their family's happy, then they can come back to work and just be the best possible self they can be. And I think that really embodies kind of UKG and the mission of these ERGs, is not just how do you professionally develop yourself, but how do you bring that into the home? How do you have these cultural discussions? How do you have these gender discussions with your family, and kind of set that example for our kids so they grow up in a world where, it can be a bit more equal and inclusive. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I love that. I'm like, do you know what? If all organizations took that mindset approach, how different kind of the world of work and our homes would be. So that's incredible to hear. Mille, I don't know if you've got anything from your perspective to add.
I think Jeremy said it very well.
Yeah, I'm like, mic drop.
Yeah.
In terms of what your hope is going forward then, because this was just the beginning of the conversation, wasn't it? It was a starting point, a springboard for you to take forward. What do you see in terms of, as things go forward, either with the mental load, but also within your ERGs? What's the kind of hope for the future?
Yeah, I think maybe starting with the last question. So the hope for the future and for the ERG is to continue to inspire the people in our ERGs, right? With sessions like the ones we had with the mental load ones, continue to make people feel like they belong here, and that they're part of something bigger.
Thank you both for the work that you do, because, as you say, you've got full-time demanding roles, and, the work that you do for these ERGs is so important and so valuable. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to collaborate with you this year.
Likewise, Nikki. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all your help with the mental load. Serious, it's changed people's lives, including my own. I wouldn't have known what to have done without that. And several people at UKG feel the same. So thank you so much for all your great work.
Thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, I'd love for you to share it on social media or with the amazing women in your life. I'd also love to connect with you, so head over to luminate-group.co.uk where you'll find ways to stay in touch. And if this episode resonated with you, one of the best ways to support the show is by subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes. Your review helps other women discover this resource, so together we can lift each other up as we rise. So thanks for listening. Until next time, take care.